Damon adjusted his silk tie in the hallway mirror, offering me that pitying, condescending smile he saved for when I was being difficult. He told me I was paranoid, that I should be grateful he tolerated my jealousy over his sister. He didn't know his burner phone was currently vibrating against my thigh in my pocket. He didn't know I had already seen the texts. And he certainly didn't know that the police were currently cutting the engine of their cruiser at the bottom of our driveway. If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. I pulled into my driveway at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night, 3 whole days earlier than Damon expected me home. The house looked dark except for a dim light glowing from our bedroom window upstairs. My body ached from the long flight back from Seattle. The recycled air of the cabin still felt like it was coating my skin, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed and surprise my husband with breakfast in the morning. I had played the scene out in my head during the entire taxi ride from the airport. I would creep in, slide under the covers, and he would wake up confused and then delighted. We would laugh about me being a ninja. It was a sweet, domestic fantasy that kept me going through the turbulence over the Midwest. But then I saw it. A silver sedan was parked right outside our house, tucked close to the curb. It wasn't a car I recognized. It didn't belong to the Johnsons next door, who drove that massive truck, and it certainly didn't belong to the elderly widow across the street. I parked my car and walked up the driveway, my suitcase wheels rumbling loudly on the pavement. I paused next to the silver car. The hood was still warm when I walked past it. I could feel the heat radiating off the metal, shimmering in the crisp October air. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. It was a physical sensation, like someone had reached inside my abdomen and squeezed. Why was there a strange car here at this hour? Maybe Damon had a friend over to watch the game. That had to be it. But Damon usually told me when people were coming over. He was meticulous about his schedule, almost obsessive. If he had guests, it would be on the shared calendar we synced to our phones. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for my house keys, and I had to take 3 deep breaths before I could steady myself enough to slide the key into the lock. I told myself I was being ridiculous. I was letting my exhaustion turn a simple unknown into a monster. It was probably just a colleague dropping off files, or maybe the plumber finally came back to fix the sink and ran late. The front door opened without a sound. I had oiled those hinges myself last month because they had started squeaking, and Damon had complained about the noise interrupting his focus. Now I was grateful for that small act of home maintenance. The living room was empty and dark, illuminated only by the streetlights filtering through the sheer curtains. But the silence wasn't total. I could hear something from upstairs. Laughter. Low voices mixing together in a way that made my skin crawl. One of those voices belonged to my husband. It was that deep, rumbling laugh he used when he was genuinely amused, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in nearly 6 months. The other voice was female. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it might burst right through my chest. It wasn't the rhythmic thud of exercise. It was the erratic, painful hammering of panic. I left my suitcase by the door. I didn't want the wheels to squeak. I took off my shoes, setting them silently on the rug. Each step up the staircase felt like I was climbing a mountain. My legs were heavy, like someone had tied lead weights around my ankles. I navigated the wooden stairs by hugging the wall, stepping on the edges where I knew the floorboards were solid and silent. 8 years of living in this house had taught me every secret it held, every creak, every groan. I use that knowledge now against the man I built this life with. The bedroom door was open just a crack. It was a sliver of darkness against the light from the hallway, just enough for me to see inside without being seen, just enough for the sounds to pour out into the hallway, where I stood frozen. Damon was sitting on our bed with the blue comforter I had picked out at that home goods store downtown because he said he liked the texture, the one with the white pillows we had bought on our 5th anniversary trip to Vermont. He was running his fingers through a woman's long, dark hair, stroking it like it was the most precious thing in the world. The motion was rhythmic, hypnotic, and sickeningly intimate. The woman was leaning into him, her body relaxed and comfortable. She was wearing something silky and cream-colored that caught the lamplight. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I realized with a sick jolt what she had on. It was my robe. The woman was wearing my silk robe that Damon had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. I remembered opening that box. I remembered him telling me it was for special occasions. And now, another woman was wearing it in my bedroom. Damon's voice drifted out to me, soft and tender. I hadn't heard him use that tone with me in months, maybe longer. It was the voice he used to use when we were dating, when he was trying to win me over. "You are so sweet," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. Not like my boring wife who only cares about her stupid job. The words hit me like physical blows. Boring wife. Stupid job. I felt the air leave my lungs. I thought about all those late nights I had worked to help pay for this house, for his luxury sedan, for the life we had built together. I thought about the promotions I had turned down because he said they would take too much time away from us. I thought about all the times I had canceled plans with friends because Damon said he needed me home, that he was lonely. All the times I had made myself smaller, quieter, less demanding because he had complained I was too much. The woman giggled. It was a light, airy sound completely devoid of guilt. "She does not appreciate you like I do," the woman said, and her voice was familiar somehow. It wasn't a stranger's voice. It had a cadence I knew, a pitch that triggered a memory in the back of my brain. My brain was working too slowly to place it, too overwhelmed by what I was seeing to process what I was hearing. I wanted to storm in there. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear them apart, but my feet were glued to the floor. Damon laughed again. "She doesn't appreciate anything," he said. "She thinks she's so smart, but she has no idea what's really going on. She actually thinks I'm working late on the Henderson account." I covered my mouth with my hand to stop the sob that was clawing its way up my throat. The Henderson account. He had used that excuse for weeks. He had made me feel guilty for asking him to come to dinner, telling me he was grinding away for our future. And then the woman turned her head. The light from the bedside lamp hit her face. Everything inside me went cold, not the cold of sadness or heartbreak, but the absolute zero of shock. I knew this woman. I knew her well. This wasn't some stranger Damon had met at a bar. This wasn't some coworker or random affair. This was someone who had sat at my dinner table every Thanksgiving for the last 4 years. Someone who had hugged me and called me sister. Someone who had cried on my shoulder just 3 months ago about her divorce and how hard her life had become. It was Veronica, Damon's younger sister. My mind rejected the image. It tried to edit reality. It tried to tell me I was hallucinating from jet lag. Sisters don't do this. Families don't betray each other like this. This was incest. This was madness. But there she was, in my robe, in my bed, with my husband's hands tangled in her hair, looking at him with eyes that were definitely not looking at a brother. I stepped back. The floorboard under my heel gave a tiny squeak. Inside the room, the movement stopped instantly. "Did you hear that?" Veronica whispered. I didn't wait. I turned and moved down the hall, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I couldn't confront them yet. If I went in there now, without a plan, without evidence, without backup, Damon would spin it. He was a master manipulator. He would tell me I was crazy. He would tell me they were just comforting each other. He would make me doubt my own eyes. I needed to be smarter. I needed to remember what started this. I needed to remember the box. I retreated to the guest bathroom at the end of the hall and locked the door with trembling fingers. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, pressing my forehead against the cool porcelain of the sink. I needed to breathe. I needed to think. The image of them together was burned into my retinas. But I forced my mind backward. I forced myself to remember why I had come home early in the first place. It hadn't started with a suspicion of infidelity. It hadn't started with lipstick on a collar or a mysterious perfume. It started 3 weeks ago in the cereal aisle of a grocery store on a rainy Tuesday. I was standing there, debating between granola and bran flakes, trying to numb out after a long day at the office. I was tired. Damon had been texting me all day about picking up his dry cleaning, and I was just trying to get through the list. Nora? The voice was shaky, terrified. I turned around and saw a woman standing by the oatmeal, clutching a basket so tight her knuckles were white. It was Elena. She looked terrible. Her hair was messy, her eyes were rimmed with red, and she was wearing a coat that looked 2 sizes too big for her. Elena had been Damon's administrative assistant at his accounting firm for 5 years. She was sweet, efficient, and loyal. Then, 2 months ago, Damon had fired her. He had come home ranting about her incompetence, claiming she had messed up files and lost client data. I had believed him. Why wouldn't I? Elena, I said, surprised, I haven't seen you since you left the firm. How are you? She flinched when I spoke. She looked over her shoulder, scanning the aisle as if she expected someone to jump out from behind the displays of instant oatmeal. I didn't leave, Nora, she whispered. He fired me. And it wasn't because I was incompetent. I frowned, stepping closer. What do you mean? Damon said you lost the Peterson files. That's a lie, Elena hissed. She was trembling. I could see the vibration in her hands. He fired me because I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. I wasn't going to say anything. I was just going to leave town. But I can't sleep. I can't live with it. She shoved a hand into her oversized coat pocket. I thought she was going for a weapon, and I took a step back, my pulse jumping. But she pulled out a crumpled piece of paper with a phone number scrawled on it. Meet me at the coffee shop on 4th and Main in 20 minutes, she said. The one in the back with the high booths. Please, Nora. You need to know. Before I could answer, she turned and practically ran toward the exit, abandoning her basket of groceries right there in the aisle. I stood there for a full minute, staring at the basket. It was full of ramen noodles and generic peanut butter, the food of someone who was struggling. Damon had told me he gave her a generous severance package. He had told me he helped her find a new job. Looking at that basket, I realized for the first time that my husband might have lied to me. The coffee shop was empty and smelled of burnt beans. Elena was sitting in the furthest booth, her back against the wall, watching the door. When I walked in, she didn't wave. She just nodded slightly. I slid into the booth opposite her. She had a black coffee in front of her that she wasn't drinking. On the seat next to her was a beat-up shoebox wrapped in duct tape. Elena, what is going on? I asked, keeping my voice low. You're scaring me. You should be scared, she said bluntly. Her eyes were intense, feverish. You're married to a monster, Nora. I bristled. Look, I know you're upset about being fired, but Damon is not a monster. He's a respected accountant. He's my husband. Elena laughed, a dry, bitter sound. He's a thief, and he's not doing it alone. She pushed the shoebox across the table. It made a heavy, scraping sound against the laminate. What is this? I asked, staring at the gray tape. He calls it the burn box, Elena said. 2 months ago, right before he fired me, he gave me this box and told me to take it to the industrial shredder in the basement. He said it was old duplicates, just trash. And, I prompted, and I tripped, she said. I dropped the box on the stairs. The lid came off. I saw what was inside. It wasn't duplicates, Nora. It was originals, receipts, passports, or copies of passports. I didn't know what to do, so I took it home. I thought maybe I could use it as leverage if he tried to screw me over on my unemployment. She leaned forward, dropping her voice to a whisper. Then he fired me the next day. He accused me of stealing office supplies to justify it so he wouldn't have to pay severance. He threatened to call the police if I ever came back. I got scared. I hid the box in my closet. I looked at the box. It looked like trash. It looked like nothing. Why give it to me now? I asked. Why not go to the police? Because he knows where I live. Elena's voice rose, cracking with hysteria. He drove past my apartment yesterday. I saw his car. That silver sedan he drives. Wait, I interrupted. Damon doesn't drive a silver sedan. He drives a black SUV. Elena stopped. She blinked at me. No, the work car. The one he keeps at the office garage. The silver sedan. He takes it when he goes to meet her. Her? I asked, my blood running cold. I don't know who she is, Elena said, sliding out of the booth. I just know her name starts with V. It's all in the box. Take it. I'm leaving town tomorrow. I'm going to my sister's in Ohio. I don't want to be here when this blows up. She stood up, looking terrified. Don't tell him you got it from me, she pleaded. Please, Nora, just look at the papers. Look at the dates. And then she was gone, the bell above the door jingling cheerfully as she fled, leaving me alone with a box of trash that was about to destroy my life. I didn't open the box until I was in my car, parked 3 blocks away in a church parking lot. My hands were shaking so badly I had to use my car keys to slice through the duct tape Elena had used to reseal it. The lid popped off. Inside, it looked like chaos. It was a mess of crumpled receipts, torn pieces of paper, and sticky notes. It smelled like stale paper and old glue. I picked up the first scrap. It was a receipt from a high-end jeweler downtown. I smoothed it out against the steering wheel, squinting at the faded ink. My heart hammered against my ribs as I read the date. It was from last Tuesday. The item listed was a diamond tennis bracelet. The price was $4,500. I stared at the number. $4,500. Last Tuesday, Damon had told me he was working late. He had come home at midnight looking exhausted, complaining about a difficult audit. He hadn't given me a bracelet. He hadn't mentioned a bonus. We shared our finances. We had a joint account. I pulled up my banking app on my phone, frantically scrolling through the transaction history. Nothing. There was no withdrawal for $4,000, which meant he had another account. I dug deeper into the box. I found a parking stub for the airport dated 3 months ago. That was the weekend I was at a conference in Chicago. Damon had told me he was going fishing with his buddies. Then I found something heavier. It was taped to the bottom of the box, hidden under a layer of shredded paper. I peeled it loose. It was a hotel key card. It was generic, white with a magnetic strip, but someone had written a room number on it in black marker, room 302. Below the key card was a folded piece of paper. It looked like a printout from an email, but the header had been torn off. I unfolded it. It was just a single paragraph of text. Flight is booked for the 24th. Passports are ready. Don't forget to transfer the assets from the escrow account before we leave. Love you, VV. Elena had said V. My mind raced. Who was V? Valerie from his office? No, she was 60. Victoria, our neighbor? No, she hated Damon. I looked at the date on the email printout. It was dated 2 days before Elena was fired. Passports, plural, transfer the assets. This wasn't just an affair. This was a plan, an exit strategy. They were planning to leave, and they were planning to take money with them. I sat in my car, the engine idling, staring at that letter V. I felt like I was floating outside of my body. My husband, the man I slept next to every night, the man who folded his socks and color-coded his bookshelf, was living a double life. And he was sloppy. He had given this box to an assistant he planned to fire, assuming she was too stupid or too scared to look inside. He was arrogant, and that arrogance was going to be his undoing. I went home that night and cooked dinner. I made lasagna, his favorite. I needed to see his face. I needed to look him in the eye and see if I could spot the liar beneath the skin of my husband. Damon came home at 6. He kissed me on the cheek, a dry, perfunctory peck. "How was your day?" he asked, loosening his tie. "It was fine," I said, stirring the sauce. "I bumped into Elena today." The change in the room was instant. The air seemed to get sucked out of the kitchen. Damon froze in the middle of unbuttoning his cuffs. He didn't turn around, but I saw his shoulders tense up. "Elena?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "What is she doing?" "I thought she moved away. She was at the grocery store," I lied. "She looked rough." "She said something weird to me, Damon." He turned around then. His face was a mask of concern, but his eyes were cold. They were calculating. "What did she say?" he asked. "You know she's unstable, Nora. That's why I had to let her go. She was making up stories about clients. It was really sad. She said you bought a diamond bracelet last Tuesday," I said. "She said she saw the receipt before she left. It was a gamble, a massive one. If Elena hadn't told him about the box, this would sound insane." Damon stared at me for a beat. Then a slow smile spread across his face. It was that toxic, benevolent smile, the one that said, "Oh, you poor, silly woman." "Oh, honey," he said, walking over and putting his hands on my shoulders. He squeezed them gently, almost like he was comforting a child. "You really shouldn't listen to her. She's obviously trying to stir up trouble because she's angry I fired her." He looked me right in the eyes. "I didn't buy a bracelet, Nora. Think about it. Why would I buy jewelry when we're trying to save for the renovation? You know I run every purchase by you. That's how we work. We're a team." He kissed my forehead. "I'm worried about you," he whispered against my skin. "You've been working so hard lately. You're letting this crazy woman get in your head. Maybe you need a vacation." I stood there, letting him hold me, feeling the warmth of his body. And for a second, just a split second, I wanted to believe him. It was so much easier to believe him. It was so much easier to think Elena was crazy and my husband was honest. But then he pulled away, and I saw it. Just a flicker. A tiny micro-expression of relief washing over his face as he turned to the refrigerator. He thought he had handled me. He thought I was subdued. He reached for a beer, and I noticed something else. A small white tan line on his wrist, right where a watch would sit, but he wasn't wearing a watch. "Where's your Rolex?" I asked. "The one I gave you for your birthday?" He paused, his hand on the beer bottle. "Oh, that." The clasp broke. I took it to the jeweler to get it repaired. "Which jeweler?" I asked. "Just the one downtown," he said vaguely, "the same one on the receipt I had in my purse." I smiled at him, a tight fake smile that mirrored his own. "Okay," I said. "Dinner's ready." I knew then. He was lying. He had sold the watch, or maybe he had given it to V. It didn't matter. What mattered was that the war had started, and he didn't even know we were on the battlefield. I did not sleep that night. I lay next to Damon, listening to the rhythmic rise and fall of his breathing, wondering if he was dreaming about numbers or the woman whose name started with V. Every time he shifted, I flinched. My skin felt too tight for my body, like I was molting. By the time the sun grayed the windows, I had made a decision. I could not do this alone. I needed a professional who could navigate the shadows better than a terrified wife with a shoebox of trash. I called Lucas Wright at 7 in the morning from a payphone outside a gas station 3 miles from my house. Elena had given me his name along with the box, scribbled on the back of a gum wrapper. She said he used to be a cop, but got pushed out for asking too many questions. That sounded like exactly the kind of person I needed. We met at a public park near the river, a place open enough that no one could sneak up on us, but noisy enough with rushing water to drown out our conversation. Lucas was sitting on a bench feeding pigeons. He looked nothing like the detectives on television. He was wearing a faded denim jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over eyes that looked perpetually tired. I sat down next to him, clutching my purse against my chest. Inside, wrapped in a plastic grocery bag, was the shoebox. "Mr. Wright?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the sound of the river. He didn't look at me. He just kept tossing crumbs to the birds. "You're the accountant's wife," he said. "Elena called me, said you might be coming." She sounded like she was halfway to the state line. "She is," I said. "She gave me this." I pulled the box out and set it on the bench between us. Lucas finally turned. He had a scar running through his left eyebrow that pulled his expression into a permanent skepticism. He opened the lid with one finger, peering inside at the chaos of receipts and shredded paper. "Garbage," he muttered. "He thinks this is garbage." "It is not garbage," I insisted, feeling a defensive heat rise in my cheeks. "There is a receipt for a diamond bracelet worth $4,000. There is a key card for a hotel room. There are emails about passports." Lucas picked up the email scrap I had found, the one about transferring assets. He read it twice, his eyes narrowing. "This is not just cheating, Mrs. Brooks," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "This is an exit strategy. People do not talk about asset transfers and passports unless they are planning to disappear." My stomach dropped. Hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way my own midnight panic hadn't. "Can you help me?" I asked. "I need to know who she is. I need to know where the money is going." Lucas closed the box and leaned back. "I charge $100 an hour plus expenses, and I need a retainer, $2,000. Cash. No checks, no credit cards. If your husband is an accountant, he will see the transaction." I nodded. I had already thought of that. I had withdrawn the daily maximum from 3 different ATMs on my way here, hitting different banks so the activity would look sporadic but not suspicious. "I have it," I said, handing him an envelope thick with $20 bills. Lucas took the envelope without counting it. He tucked it into his jacket pocket. "Go home," he said. "Act normal. Do not change your routine. Do not ask him about the bracelet again. If he is planning to run, he is on a hair trigger. If he smells smoke, he will be gone before I can find the paper trail." I stood up, feeling a strange mix of relief and terror. I had just handed a stranger $2,000 to stalk my husband. I was officially crossing a line I could never uncross. 2 weeks ago, the doorbell rang at 6 in the evening. I was in the kitchen chopping vegetables for a salad, trying to focus on the simple mechanical motion of the knife. Chop, slide, chop, slide. It was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking. Damon practically sprinted to the door. I had never seen him move that fast for a delivery or a neighbor. I wiped my hands on a towel and followed him into the hallway, staying a few steps back. When he opened the door, a woman was standing there. She was petite, with dark hair that fell in loose waves around a heart-shaped face. She was beautiful in a sharp, angular way. "Veronica!" Damon shouted, throwing his arms around her. He lifted her off her feet. She laughed, wrapping her legs around his waist for a split second before sliding back down. It was a greeting that felt too enthusiastic, too physical. My internal alarm bells started ringing instantly. Brothers and sisters hugged, sure, but they didn't cling to each other like they were drowning. I forced a smile onto my face as I stepped forward. This was the woman. This was V. I knew it in my gut, even though I had no proof yet. "You must be Veronica," I said, extending my hand. "I am Nora. Damon has told me—" "Well, he actually hasn't told me much, other than you needed a place to crash." Veronica took my hand. Her skin was cool and dry, her grip surprisingly firm. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my messy bun and my apron. "It is so nice to finally meet you," she said, her voice dripping with sweetness. "Damon talks about you all the time. He says you are such a hard worker." The compliment landed like a dart. Hard worker. Not beautiful, not loving, not brilliant. Just a worker, a mule. "I am so sorry to impose," she continued, releasing my hand to smooth down her skirt. "The divorce has been messy. I just needed to get away from everything for a while, and Big Brother here said your guest room was open." She looked at Damon, and her eyes softened. The look that passed between them was electric. It was a look of shared secrets, of an inside joke that I wasn't part of. "Of course," I said, my voice sounding tight to my own ears. "Family is family. Stay as long as you need." Damon beamed at me, clearly relieved I wasn't making a scene. "See? I told you she was cool," he said to Veronica. "Come on, let me get your bags." He grabbed her 2 large suitcases. They looked heavy, heavier than what someone would pack for a short visit. I watched them walk up the stairs together. Damon was leaning in close to her, whispering something that made her giggle. The sound of her laughter echoed in the hallway, bouncing off the framed wedding photos on the wall. I stood there alone, listening to the wheels of her suitcases rolling over the floorboards above my head. It sounded like thunder. Dinner that night was an exercise in torture. I had made a roast chicken, trying to play the role of the welcoming hostess. Veronica sat across from me, picking at her food like she was critiquing it. Damon sat at the head of the table, looking back and forth between us like a man watching a tennis match he'd already fixed. "So, Nora," Veronica said, taking a tiny sip of wine, "Damon tells me you are up for a promotion. That must be so stressful. It is a lot of responsibility," I admitted. "But I enjoy the work." Veronica sighed, leaning her chin on her hand. "I don't know how you do it. I mean, honestly, I think women who prioritize their careers are so brave. I always wanted to be a mother first, but I guess not everyone has that instinct." I froze, my fork hovering halfway to my mouth. We had been trying for a baby for 2 years. Damon knew how much it hurt me every time a month passed with no news. He knew I had cried in the bathroom just last week. I looked at Damon, expecting him to defend me, expecting him to say that we wanted kids, that we were trying. Instead, he nodded in agreement with her. "Nora is very career-focused," he said, pouring more wine into Veronica's glass. "It is probably for the best right now. With her hours, a baby would just be raised by a nanny anyway." The betrayal stole the breath from my lungs. He was using our private struggle, our shared pain, as a weapon to bond with her. He was rewriting our history to make me look cold and detached. I gripped my fork so hard the metal dug into my palm. "I am not too busy for a family," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "We have been trying." Veronica's eyes went wide, filled with that toxic, fake sympathy. "Oh, honey, I didn't know. I am so sorry. But maybe it is nature's way of telling you to slow down. You look so tired." "Doesn't she look tired, Damon?" "She looks exhausted," Damon agreed. "You have bags under your eyes, Nora. You really should take better care of yourself." They were doing it in tandem, a seamless duet of criticism masked as concern. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I tired? Did I look terrible? Was I the problem? I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I am going to get dessert," I said, grabbing my plate. I walked into the kitchen and stood by the sink, gripping the porcelain edge until my knuckles turned white. I could hear them whispering in the dining room. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was intimate, conspiratorial. I wasn't crazy. They were gaslighting me. They were trying to make me feel weak so I wouldn't fight back. But they had made a mistake. They had underestimated how much fight I had left. 3 nights later, Damon announced they were going out for ice cream. "You hate ice cream," I said, looking up from my laptop on the couch. "You say it makes your teeth hurt." Damon shrugged, adjusting his jacket. "Veronica wants some. She is still feeling down about the ex. I figured I would take her for a drive, show her around town. You want to come?" The invitation was hollow. I could see it in his eyes. He was begging me to say no. "I have work to catch up on," I said. "Great, don't wait up," he said too quickly. As soon as the front door closed and I heard the engine of his black SUV fade down the street, I sprang into action. I didn't have much time, maybe an hour, maybe less. I went straight to the garage. Elena had mentioned something else in our meeting, something I had almost forgotten in the panic about the passports. She said Damon had been obsessed with his toolbox lately. She said he kept locking it, which was weird because he never fixed anything. The garage was cold and smelled of gasoline and old cardboard. I flipped on the singular buzzing overhead light. The toolbox was a massive red metal chest sitting on the workbench. It was covered in dust, except for the handle, which was clean. I tried the drawers. Locked. Of course. I looked around for a key. Damon wasn't creative. He hid things in plain sight. I checked the magnetic bowl he kept screws in. Nothing. I checked under the mat. Nothing. Then I remembered. The fake rock in the garden where we kept the spare house key. He had bought a second one last month. I had asked him why, and he said the first one looked too fake. I ran out the side door into the garden, dropping to my knees in the dirt. I frantically felt around the flower bed until my fingers brushed against cold plastic. I grabbed the rock and slid the bottom panel open. There was a small silver key inside. I ran back into the garage, my heart hammering. I jammed the key into the lock of the top chest. It turned with a satisfying click. I threw the lid open. At first glance, it was just tools. Hammers, screwdrivers, a wrench set still in its plastic packaging. But the depth was wrong. The drawer looked shallow. I started pulling the tools out, tossing them onto the concrete floor with a clatter. I didn't care about the noise. I pulled out the foam liner at the bottom of the drawer. Underneath, there was a metal panel. I pried it up with my fingernails, breaking one in the process. The pain was sharp, but I ignored it. The panel popped loose. The space beneath the false bottom was lined with felt. Sitting there, neat and orderly, were 2 blue booklets. Passports. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the first one. I opened it. The photo was Damon, but he looked different. He had a beard in the picture and his hair was dyed a lighter shade of brown. I looked at the name printed next to the photo. David Miller. I stared at it. David Miller. My husband, the man I had married, was David Miller. I opened the second passport. The photo was Veronica, but her hair was blonde, cut short in a bob. She looked sophisticated, unrecognizable. The name read Victoria Miller. Victoria. V. Elena was right. I flipped through the pages. They were real passports. The holograms shimmered under the garage light. The paper felt thick and textured. These weren't cheap fakes printed on a home computer. These were professional forgeries. They must have cost thousands of dollars. I looked at the dates of issue. They were from 5 years ago. My breath hitched. 5 years ago? We'd been married for 8 years. That meant he had these almost the entire time we were together. This wasn't a sudden plan to run away because of the embezzlement. This was a fail-safe. This was something he had kept in his back pocket, just in case. He had always planned to have an escape route, and that route never included me. I felt sick. I sat down on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by scattered tools, holding the evidence of my husband's double life. I traced the name Victoria Miller with my thumb. Wait, Miller. They had the same last name in the fake passports. Why would they choose the same last name if they were running away together as lovers? Unless they were pretending to be married. Or... My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump. I nearly dropped the passports into a puddle of oil. It was Lucas. I answered on the first ring, my voice breathless. "I found them," I whispered. "I found the passports. They are in the garage. His name is David Miller. Hers is Victoria Miller." Lucas didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Listen to me, Nora. I have been digging into the sister story. I ran a background check on Veronica Brooks." "And?" I asked, clutching the phone. "She does not exist," Lucas said. "The woman in your house? She is not his sister." I closed my eyes. I knew it. I knew they were sleeping together, but hearing it confirmed was a different kind of pain. "So, they are just lovers?" "No," Lucas said, and his voice was grim. "It is worse than that. I found a marriage certificate from Nevada dated 12 years ago. The world stopped spinning. Damon Brooks and Veronica Vance were married 12 years ago," Lucas said. "They got divorced 2 years later, on paper at least. But then I found adoption records. His parents didn't adopt her. They were foster kids in the same group home system. They are not biological siblings, Nora. They are childhood sweethearts who have been running cons together since they were 18. My head was spinning. Foster kids? Cons? "The embezzlement," Lucas continued, the pace of his words speeding up. "I tracked the shell company. It is called V&D Holdings. The money isn't just sitting there, it is being funneled into offshore accounts in the Caymans. But here is the kicker. I looked at the list of clients he is stealing from. He paused. Nora, he is not stealing from corporate accounts. He is liquidating the retirement funds of his elderly clients. He is wiping out life savings, people in nursing homes, widows. He is targeting the vulnerable because they are less likely to check their statements online. I looked down at the passports in my lap. I thought about the nice old lady across the street who trusted Damon with her taxes. I thought about the sweet cards his clients sent him at Christmas. He is a predator, I whispered. He is, Lucas agreed. And he is almost done. The activity on the accounts has spiked in the last 3 days. They are cashing out. You do not have much time. If they get on a plane with those passports, you will never see him or that money again. What do I do? I asked, panic rising in my throat. Put the passports back, Lucas ordered. Exactly how you found them. Wipe your fingerprints. Do not let him know you know. We need to catch them with the bag in their hands. We need to trap them. I hung up the phone. I looked at the passports one last time. David and Victoria Miller. A happy couple ready to start a new life on the bones of innocent people. I put them back in the false bottom. I replaced the foam. I threw the tools back in, trying to make it look messy but natural. I locked the chest. I ran back to the garden and hid the key in the rock. I made it back to the couch and opened my laptop just as headlights swept across the living room window. They were back. I typed a random sentence into a spreadsheet, my heart thudding against my ribs. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a spy in my own home, and I was about to burn their entire world to the ground. The waiting was the hardest part. It was a physical weight, like wearing a lead vest under my clothes. Every interaction with Damon felt like a performance in a high-stakes play where I hadn't memorized the lines. I sat in Dr. Watt's office 3 days later, twisting a loose thread on the arm of her beige couch until it snapped. "You seem distracted today, Nora," Dr. Watts said gently. Her pen hovered over her notebook. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that my husband was a con artist named David Miller, that his sister was his ex-wife, and that I was currently paying a private investigator to teach me how to entrap them. But Lucas had been clear. Tell no one. Not your mother, not your therapist, not your dog. If this leaks, they run. I am just stressed about work, I lied. My voice sounded thin and reedy. This Seattle trip coming up, it is a big presentation. I feel like everything is riding on it. Dr. Watts nodded, scribbling something down. Probably patient exhibit signs of extreme burnout. You have to remember to breathe, Nora, she said. You hold so much tension in your jaw. What is the worst that could happen if the presentation goes wrong? I almost laughed. A hysterical, bubbling laugh that would have definitely gotten me committed. The worst that could happen. I could lose my life savings. I could lose my home. I could be left destitute while my husband sips Mai Tais in the Caymans with a woman who wears my bathrobe. I suppose life would go on, I said, forcing my jaw to unclench. I left the session feeling worse than when I arrived. Walking to my car, I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. I drove past the dry cleaner where I used to pick up Damon's shirts. I drove past the Italian restaurant where we had our first date. Every landmark felt like a lie. It was all a set, a backdrop for the long con he had been running since the day we met. I realized then that I wasn't just mourning my marriage. I was mourning my history. If the past 8 years were a lie, then who had I been all that time? Just a mark? A source of income? I gripped the steering wheel so hard my hands cramped. No, I wasn't just a mark. I was the person who was going to take him down. I met Lucas again the day before my scheduled departure. This time, we met in the back of a 24-hour diner on the edge of town. It was 2 p.m, but the place was empty except for a trucker eating pie at the counter. Lucas slid a small black object across the sticky table. It looked like a phone charger block. "It is a camera," he said quietly. "Wi-Fi enabled. It plugs into any outlet. It has a wide-angle lens and a microphone. It streams directly to a cloud server. I will send you the login. I picked it up. It felt heavy, substantial. Where do I put it? I asked. Somewhere central, Lucas said. Living room or kitchen. Somewhere they will feel comfortable talking. They won't suspect a charger. It is too common. He took a sip of his black coffee. Here's the timeline, he continued. You leave tomorrow morning for the airport. You actually go to the airport. You check in. You go through security. You wait at the gate until everyone boards. Then you leave. You take a cab to the Motel 6 on the south side. I have booked a room under a fake name. Why the airport? I asked. Can't I just drive to the motel? Damon tracks your phone, Nora, Lucas said. The statement hit me like a bucket of ice water. He does? I scanned his phone while you were in the bathroom at the park last time, Lucas said matter-of-factly. He has a family tracking app installed on your device. He hid the icon. He knows every time you leave the house. If you don't go to the airport, he will know. I felt sick. My phone, my constant companion, was a spy. So I go to the gate, I repeated, trying to steady my voice. You go to the gate. You turn your phone off. You leave it off. That will look like you are in the air. Then you go to the motel. You watch the feed. When you see something incriminating, and you will, you call me on the burner phone I gave you. Do not engage them alone. I nodded. The plan was solid. It was terrifying, but it was solid. One more thing, Lucas said, leaning in. He pulled a file folder out of his jacket. I found the escrow account. It is ready to drain. They are waiting for one thing. What? I asked. You, Lucas said. They are waiting for you to leave so they can clear out the joint accounts without you getting a fraud alert. As soon as your plane supposedly takes off, the money will start moving. We have to catch them in that window. The next morning, the air in the house was thick with tension. I packed my suitcase with slow, deliberate movements, 2 suits, my running shoes, a book I would never read. Every item I placed in the bag felt like a lie I was constructing. Damon stood in the doorway, drinking coffee from his favorite mug. He looked relaxed, happy even. Do you have your boarding pass? He asked. It is on my phone, I said, zipping the suitcase shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room. Veronica popped her head in from the hallway. She was wearing yoga pants and a tight tank top. She looked entirely too comfortable in my home. Safe travels, Nora, she chirped. Don't worry about Damon. I will make sure he doesn't starve. I am sure you will, I said. I grabbed the handle of my suitcase, my knuckles white. Damon walked me to the car. He leaned in to kiss me. I had to force myself not to recoil. I had to force myself to lean into it, to let his lips touch mine. His breath smelled of coffee and peppermint. It was a scent I used to associate with comfort. Now it just smelled like betrayal. Call me when you land, he said, smiling that boyish smile that had charmed me 8 years ago. I will, I promised. I got into the car and backed out of the driveway. I waved at them. They stood side by side on the porch, a perfect picture of a loving husband and his supportive sister. As I turned the corner, I watched them in the rearview mirror. As soon as they thought I was out of sight, Damon put his arm around her waist, not a brotherly squeeze, a possessive lover's hold. I drove to the airport on autopilot. My hands were shaking, but my resolve was hardening into something cold and sharp. I wasn't just leaving for a trip. I was leaving my life behind. When I came back, nothing would be the same. The Motel 6 room smelled of lemon cleaner and stale cigarettes. The carpet was a suspicious shade of brown, and the curtains were thick and heavy, blocking out the midday sun. I sat at the small round table, my laptop open in front of me. I had followed Lucas's instructions perfectly. I went to the airport. I sat at the gate for 2 hours, watching families and business travelers board the flight to Seattle. I turned off my phone the moment the gate agent closed the door. I walked out, hailed a cab, and paid cash. Now, I was a ghost. I logged into the server Lucas had set up. The screen flickered to life. The camera view was perfect. I had plugged the charger into the outlet above the kitchen counter, angling it toward the living room. It gave me a clear view of the island, the dining table, and the sofa. The house was empty. They must have gone out. I waited. Time moved like molasses. I watched the sun shift across the floorboards of my living room on the screen. I watched the dust motes dance in the light. It was surreal to spy on my own home, to see it as a stage where a tragedy was about to unfold. I ate a granola bar from my purse because I was too nauseous to order food. I paced the small room. I checked the burner phone Lucas had given me. Full battery. At 4 o'clock, the front door on the screen opened. Damon walked in. He was carrying a bottle of champagne. Veronica followed him. She was laughing. She threw her purse onto the kitchen counter, my kitchen counter, and spun around, her arms wide. "She is gone!" she cheered. "The witch is finally gone!" Damon set the champagne down and grabbed her. He lifted her up, spinning her around. 5 days, baby, he said. "We have 5 whole days." I watched, frozen as he kissed her. It was a deep, hungry kiss. I felt bile rise in my throat. I had to look away, but I couldn't. I needed to see this. I needed to burn this image into my brain so I would never, ever feel sorry for him again. I put my headphones on, turning the volume up. The microphone on the camera was surprisingly good. I could hear the pop of the cork as Damon opened the champagne. "To freedom," Veronica said, clinking her glass against his. "To V&D Holdings," Damon corrected, "and to Nora's retirement fund." They laughed. It was a cruel, ugly sound. Damon took a long sip of champagne and leaned back against the counter. "I already initiated the transfer," he said. "It will clear by tomorrow morning. By the time she lands and turns her phone back on, the accounts will be empty." "What about the house?" Veronica asked, picking at a grape from the fruit bowl. "We will let the bank take it," Damon said with a shrug. "Who cares? We will be in Costa Rica. I have the agent ready to list it as a foreclosure in a month." He paused, looking around the kitchen. "I am going to miss the espresso machine, though." Veronica rolled her eyes. "We will buy a better one." With her money. That was it. That was the trigger. With her money. They weren't just stealing my savings. They were stealing my labor, my time, my stress, my late nights, my sacrifices. They were toasting to my destruction with champagne bought with my paycheck. I felt a cold calm settle over me. The shaking in my hands stopped. The nausea vanished. I picked up the burner phone and dialed Lucas. "They are home," I said. "They are celebrating. They just admitted to the transfer on tape." "I am 10 minutes away," Lucas said. "Meet me down the street. Do not go in alone." I grabbed my purse and the keys to the rental car I had picked up near the motel. I took one last look at the screen. Damon was nuzzling Veronica's neck while she giggled. "Enjoy it," I whispered to the screen. "It is the last happy moment you will ever have." I drove back to my neighborhood like a woman possessed. The speed limit was a suggestion. I wove through traffic, my eyes fixed on the road, my mind replaying the footage I had just seen. The sun had set by the time I turned onto my street. The neighborhood was quiet. Blue light flickered from televisions in living room windows. People were eating dinner, watching the news, living their normal, honest lives. I parked the rental car 3 houses down behind a large van. I saw Lucas's nondescript sedan parked across the street. He flashed his headlights once. I got out of the car. The evening air was cool and crisp. I could smell burning leaves and someone grilling burgers. It was such a suburban, wholesome smell. It clashed violently with the violence I was about to inflict on my husband's life. I walked up the sidewalk. My heels clicked softly on the pavement. I didn't care about being quiet anymore. I wasn't sneaking around. I was marching to war. I reached my driveway, and there it was, the silver sedan. The car Elena had warned me about. The car Damon claimed didn't exist. It was parked right behind his SUV, bold as brass. They hadn't even bothered to hide it in the garage. They were so confident, so sure of their victory, that they had gotten sloppy. I walked past the hood of the silver car. It was still warm. I touched it just to ground myself in reality. This was real. The car was real. The betrayal was real. I reached for my house keys. My hand trembled, but not from fear, from rage, a pure, white-hot rage that clarified everything. I took a deep breath. I thought about the receipts in the shoebox. I thought about the passports in the toolbox. I thought about the champagne toast in my kitchen. I slid the key into the lock. It turned silently. I pushed the door open. I stepped into the hallway, the sound of my own heartbeat louder than the creaking floorboards beneath my feet. From the kitchen, the laughter continued, oblivious and cruel. I walked past the living room, my eyes fixing on the scene I had just watched on a pixelated screen, now horrifyingly high definition. Damon was leaning against the granite island, a champagne flute in one hand, his other hand resting possessively on Veronica's hip. She was giggling, her head thrown back, exposing the long line of her throat. Damon saw me first. His smile didn't fade immediately. It froze, then cracked, then shattered. The glass in his hand slipped. It hit the floor with a wet, sharp crash, sending shards of crystal and foaming champagne skittering across the tile. "Nora," he breathed. The name sounded foreign in his mouth, like a word he hadn't expected to use ever again. Veronica spun around, her eyes widening. She didn't look scared, though. She looked annoyed, like I was a waitress who had interrupted a private conversation. "You were supposed to be in Seattle," she snapped, crossing her arms over her chest. I walked until I was standing right at the edge of the kitchen, the threshold between the wife I used to be and the woman I had become. "And you are supposed to be my sister-in-law," I said, my voice steady and cold. "But we both know that is a lie, Victoria." The use of her real name hit them like a physical blow. Veronica flinched, taking a step back. Damon went pale, the color draining from his face until he looked like a wax figure. Damon recovered first. He set his empty hand on the counter, leaning forward with that familiar, sickening look of concern. He lowered his voice, pitching it to that soothing frequency he used when he wanted to manipulate me. "Nora, honey, you are clearly exhausted," he said. "You are confusing reality with movies or something. Look at you. You are shaking." I was shaking, but not from confusion. I was vibrating with adrenaline. "Do not gaslight me, Damon," I said. "Or should I call you David? David Miller?" He winced, but he didn't stop. He walked around the island, approaching me slowly, hands up, palms open. "Okay, so you found out about the names," he said, his voice smooth as oil. "Listen to me, babe. That was a past life. We had to change our names to get away from abusive foster parents. We did it for survival. We didn't tell you because we didn't want to burden you with our trauma." He reached out to touch my arm. I slapped his hand away. The sound echoed in the silent kitchen. "And the embezzlement?" I asked. "The $200,000 you stole from the elderly? Was that for survival too? Or was that just for the retirement fund you were toasting to 5 minutes ago?" Damon's face hardened. The mask slipped, revealing the predator underneath. "We are building a future, Nora," he said, his voice losing its warmth. "A future you could have been part of if you weren't so obsessed with being mediocre. We didn't steal that money. We reallocated it. Those people, they don't even know what they have. They are just sitting on it. We are going to use it to actually live." He smiled then, a terrifying, bright smile. "We could still go," he said. "You, me, and Veronica. We could go to Costa Rica. We could be a family. A real family, not this boring suburban performance." The audacity stole my breath. He was inviting me to join his crime ring. He was trying to recruit me. I looked at Veronica. She was smirking, waiting to see if I would fold. "I am not your family," I said quietly, "and I am not going anywhere with you, except maybe to the police station to watch you get booked." Damon laughed. It was a sharp barking sound. "You didn't call the police, Nora. You don't have the guts. You are too worried about what the neighbors will think. You are too worried about your precious reputation." He took a step toward me, his eyes dark. "Give me your phone," he ordered. "Now." The front door behind me burst open. The sound was thunderous, wood striking the wall. Heavy footsteps pounded down the hallway. "Police! Show me your hands!" Detective Parker stormed into the kitchen, her service weapon drawn and leveled at Damon's chest. Behind her, 2 uniformed officers fanned out, their movements precise and practiced, and behind them, standing in the doorway with a grim satisfaction on his face, was Lucas. Damon froze. His hands, which had been reaching for me, shot up into the air. Veronica let out a high-pitched scream, backing up until she hit the refrigerator. Detective Parker moved forward, her eyes locked on Damon. "David Miller, also known as Damon Brooks, you are under arrest for wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny," she recited. Damon looked at me. His eyes were wide, pleading. He looked like a child who had been caught stealing cookies, not a man who had stolen millions. "Nora, tell them," he begged. "Tell them it is a misunderstanding. Tell them I am your husband." I stood my ground, watching the officer grab his wrists and pull them behind his back. "You are not my husband," I said, my voice cutting through the chaos. "You are just a con artist who stayed too long." The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. It was metal on metal, a final punctuation mark to 8 years of lies. Veronica was not going quietly. As a female officer approached her, she lashed out, her fingernails raking the air. "Get off me!" she shrieked. "You don't know who I am. This is harassment. She is an accomplice," I shouted over her screaming. "Her name is Victoria Miller. She is his ex-wife. Check her purse on the counter. The fake passports are in there." Veronica shot me a look of pure venom. If looks could kill, I would have dropped dead on the kitchen tiles. "You jealous cow," she spat. "You were always jealous of me. You knew he loved me more. You knew it." "Oh, honey," I said, channeling a fraction of her own toxic sweetness. "I don't care who he loves. I just care that he is going to prison, and you are going with him. Maybe you can share a cell. It will be just like old times." The officer spun Veronica around and slammed her against the fridge to cuff her. She sobbed, her legs giving out, playing the victim until the very end. Damon was silent now. He hung his head, refusing to look at me. The bravado was gone. The charm was gone. All that was left was a small, pathetic man in a wrinkled shirt. Lucas walked over to me. He didn't smile. He just nodded. "We got the transfer log," he said quietly. "We stopped it. The money is frozen. The bank was waiting for the final authorization from his device. We caught it in time. I felt my knees go weak. The money was safe. The clients were safe." I slumped against the island, right next to the spilled champagne. They led them out the front door. I followed, drawn by a morbid curiosity to see them leave my life forever. Outside, the quiet suburban street had transformed into a spectacle. Blue and red lights washed over the manicured lawns. The neighbors were out on their porches, clutching robes tight against the evening chill. Mrs. Gable from next door was standing by her hedges, her hand over her mouth. I watched as the officers guided Damon toward the cruiser. He stumbled on the curb. He looked up, scanning the faces of the neighbors he had charmed at block parties, the people whose taxes he had done, whose hands he had shaken. They stared back in silence. No one offered to help. No one shouted in his defense. The illusion was broken. They shoved him into the back seat. He had to duck his head awkwardly. It was such a mundane, humiliating movement. Veronica was next. She was weeping loudly, a theatrical performance meant to garner sympathy. But the neighbors just watched. They knew. In the way that small communities always know when something is wrought, they sensed the truth now that it was exposed. Detective Parker stopped on the porch where I was standing. "We will need you at the station tomorrow for a formal statement," she said. "But for tonight, the house is a crime scene. We have to seize computers, files, anything related to the business. You can't stay here." I looked back into the house. My house. The place where I had picked out paint colors and hosted holiday dinners. It felt alien now. It felt like a movie set for a horror film. "I don't want to stay here," I said. "I never want to sleep in this house again." The police cars drove away, taking the noise and the chaos with them. Lucas stayed behind to coordinate with the forensics team that was just arriving. I stood on the lawn, shivering in the cool night air. The adrenaline that had sustained me for the last hour was crashing, leaving me hollow and trembling. A car pulled up to the curb, tires screeching. It was Brianna. She was out of the car before the engine stopped running. She ran across the lawn, dodging a crime scene tech, and wrapped me in a fierce hug. "I got your text," she gasped. "Are you okay? Did they hurt you?" I buried my face in her shoulder, smelling her familiar perfume. The dam broke. I didn't cry, but I shook. I shook so hard my teeth chattered. "They are gone," I whispered. "They are both gone." Brianna pulled back, holding me at arm's length. She looked at the police tape being strung across my front door. She looked at the flashing lights of the forensics van. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with awe. "You actually took them down." I looked at the house. I saw the window to the bedroom where I had found them. I saw the kitchen window where they had toasted to my ruin. "I lost everything, Bree," I said, my voice cracking. "My marriage, my home, my money is frozen. I am homeless." "No," Brianna said firmly. She grabbed my hand, squeezing it tight. "You lost a dead weight. You lost a parasite. You have your freedom. You have your job. And tonight you have my guest room." She started pulling me toward her car. "Come on," she said. "We are getting you a cheeseburger, and then we are getting you a very large glass of wine." I let her lead me away. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look back at the silver sedan still parked in the driveway, a monument to the lies I had lived with. I got into Brianna's car and closed the door, shutting out the sirens, the neighbors, and the wreckage of the life I thought I had. The coffee in the interrogation room tasted like burnt rubber and regret. I sat at a metal table that was bolted to the floor, my hands wrapped around the styrofoam cup for warmth. It was 10 in the morning, but I felt like I had been awake for a decade. Detective Parker sat across from me. She looked fresh, sharp, and terrifyingly competent. She had a thick file folder in front of her. "We need to talk about the scope, Mrs. Brooks," she said. "Or should I call you Ms. Vance? I know you kept your maiden name legally." I flinched. I had kept my name for professional reasons, but Damon had always hated it. He used to say it made us look less united. Now, I realized he probably hated it because it made it harder for him to forge my signature on joint documents. "Call me Nora," I said. "Just Nora." "How bad is it?" Detective Parker opened the file. She didn't use a list. She spread photographs across the table like a grim tarot spread. They were not pictures of money. They were pictures of people. "We have identified 12 victims so far," she said. "This is Mr. Henderson. He is 82. He has early onset dementia. Your husband convinced him to liquidate his stocks to buy into a secure annuity that didn't exist. This is Mrs. Klein. She is a widow who trusted your husband with her life insurance payout. He took everything." I stared at the faces. They looked kind. They looked like grandparents. They looked like people who baked cookies and knit scarves. "He told me he was managing corporate mergers," I whispered. I felt bile rise in my throat. I thought he was just greedy. I didn't know he was evil. "He used you, Nora," Detective Parker said gently but firmly. "You were the cover. The successful, hard-working wife with the clean record. You made him look respectable. You were the camouflage he wore so he could get close to these people." The room seemed to tilt. I wasn't just a victim. I was a prop. For 8 years, I had been the shiny object he waved around to distract people while he picked their pockets. I thought about every dinner party where he bragged about my job. He wasn't proud of me. He was establishing his alibi. I left the police station feeling like I was made of glass. One wrong move and I would shatter. I needed to go to the bank. I needed to get cash. I had given my last $2,000 to Lucas. I had nothing in my wallet but a stick of gum and a maxed-out credit card. I walked into the bank branch on 4th Street. The teller was a young woman I recognized. She smiled when she saw me. "Hi, Mrs. Brooks. Checking or savings today?" she chirped. "I need to make a withdrawal," I said. "Everything. Close the accounts." Her smile faltered. She typed something into her keyboard. Then she frowned. She typed again, harder this time. "I am sorry," she said, her voice dropping. "I have a flag here. It says, federal seizure?" My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" I asked. "It means the accounts are frozen," she said, "by the FBI. Checking, savings, the joint investment portfolio. I can't access anything. It says pending investigation under the RICO Act." "But that is my money too," I pleaded, my voice rising. "My paychecks go in there, my savings from before I met him." "I am really sorry," she said, looking genuinely pained. "You will have to talk to the federal prosecutor. I can't give you a dime." I walked out of the bank into the bright, blinding sunlight. I had a house I couldn't sleep in. I had a car that was technically evidence, and now I had $0 to my name. I stood on the sidewalk watching people buy sandwiches and newspapers, engaging in commerce I could no longer participate in. I was 32 years old, a senior marketing executive, and I was destitute. I had to call Brianna. I had to ask my best friend for money to buy a toothbrush. The humiliation burned hotter than the sun. 2 days later, I was sitting on Brianna's guest bed, staring at a wall I had stared at for 48 hours. My phone rang. It wasn't a number I knew. A robotic voice announced that I had a collect call from the county detention center. I should have hung up. Lucas would have told me to hang up. But I needed to hear it. I needed to hear him one last time without the champagne and the laughter. I accepted the call. "Nora?" His voice was small, tinny, and echoing. "Nora, thank God. You have to get me out of here. This is all a misunderstanding. The lawyer they gave me is an idiot." I didn't say anything. I just breathed into the receiver, listening to the sound of his desperation. "Babe, listen," he continued, his voice shifting into that reasonable, calm tone he used when we argued about finances. "I know you are upset, and you have every right to be, but you are overreacting. We can fix this. I did this for us. I wanted us to have a better life. I wanted to take you to Costa Rica. I was going to surprise you." I almost laughed. The lie was so lazy. "You were going to surprise me by running away with your ex-wife, who you pretended was your sister?" I asked. He sighed, a long, disappointed sigh. "You are so hung up on the details, Nora. Victoria is just a friend. She understands business. She was helping me set up the accounts. You are so rigid. You see everything in black and white. That is why you are so unhappy. I was trying to give you freedom, toxic positivity. Even from a jail cell wearing an orange jumpsuit, he was trying to spin his felony into a favor he had done for me. He was trying to make me feel guilty for not appreciating his grand larceny. You are right, Damon, I said. I am rigid. I am so rigid that I think stealing from old people is wrong. I am so rigid that I think incest is gross. Nora, don't be like this, he snapped. You need me. Who is going to pay the mortgage? Who is going to take care of you? You are a mess, Nora. You fall apart when the toaster breaks. You can't handle this alone. I looked around Brianna's guest room. I looked at the bag of toiletries I had bought with borrowed money. I looked at the mirror. I looked tired. I looked pale. But I wasn't falling apart. I am handling it just fine, David, I said. And the mortgage isn't my problem anymore. It is the bank's. I hung up the phone. I blocked the number. And for the first time in 8 years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt clean. I got permission to enter the house one last time to retrieve my personal effects. Detective Parker met me there. She stood by the door while I walked through the wreckage of my marriage. The house smelled stale. It smelled like the police chemicals they used for prints and the lingering scent of Damon's expensive cologne. I walked into the bedroom. The bed was stripped. The police had taken the sheets as evidence. I didn't pack much. I took my clothes. I took my jewelry box, though I left the engagement ring sitting on the dresser. It was a cubic zirconia anyway. I had found the appraisal in the burn box. He had told me it was a flawless diamond worth $10,000. It was worth $50. I went to the closet. I found a box on the top shelf. It was the memories box Damon kept. I opened it. It wasn't full of our memories. It was full of hers. There were old photos of him and Victoria on a beach, dated 5 years ago. There were love letters written on hotel stationery. There was a lock of her hair tied with a ribbon. He had kept a shrine to her in the closet we shared. He had slept 3 feet away from it every night. I took the box downstairs to the kitchen. I dumped it into the trash can. I didn't burn it. I didn't scream. I just dumped it in with the old coffee grounds and the rotting fruit the police had left behind. Trash goes with trash, I said to the empty room. I walked out the front door. I left the keys on the counter. I left the furniture I had spent months picking out. I left the ghost of the woman who thought she was happy. I walked to Brianna's car and didn't look back. The courtroom was freezing. It was 6 months later, but the air felt like the dead of winter. I sat in the back row, squeezed between Brianna and Lucas. Lucas had come to support me, or maybe just to see his handiwork completed. David, sat at the defense table. He had lost weight. His hair was thinning. He looked like an accountant who had been audited by God. Victoria sat at a separate table. She refused to look at him. Her lawyer had cut a deal where she testified against him in exchange for a lighter sentence. There is no honor among thieves, especially divorced ones. The judge was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. She read the victim impact statements aloud. Mrs. Klein wrote that she had to sell her house because she couldn't afford the property tax anymore. Mr. Henderson's daughter wrote that her father couldn't afford the memory care facility he needed. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Damon stood up when it was his turn to speak. "I am sorry," he said. His voice cracked. It was a good performance. I never meant to hurt anyone. I got in over my head. I was trying to fix it. The judge wasn't buying it. "Mr. Miller," she said, looking over her glasses, "you didn't get in over your head. You built a swimming pool of other people's money and dove in. You are a predator." She sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison. Victoria got 8. As the bailiffs led him away, Damon turned to look at the gallery. He scanned the faces until he found mine. He opened his mouth to say something, maybe to beg, maybe to blame. I didn't look away. I didn't cry. I just stared at him until he blinked. He was the one who looked away first. It was over. I met Elena at a coffee shop downtown a week after the sentencing. It wasn't the dark, dingy place where we had first met. It was a bright, airy cafe with plants in the windows and indie music playing softly. Elena looked different. She had cut her hair and was wearing a blazer. She looked like a person who slept at night. "I got a job," she said, smiling as she stirred her latte, "at a logistics company. They actually pay me overtime." "I am so glad, Elena," I said. "I really am." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You saved me, Nora," she said. "If you hadn't taken that box, if you hadn't believed me, he would have pinned it all on me. I would be the one in jail." "We saved each other," I said. "I was drowning and I didn't even know it. You threw me the life preserver." We sat there for a long time, just drinking coffee and watching people walk by on the street. It was a normal Tuesday. No one was chasing us. No one was lying to us. "So, what is next for you?" Elena asked. I smiled. For the first time in a year, the smile reached my eyes. "I don't know," I admitted. "I am living in a studio apartment the size of a closet. I am still paying off my legal fees. I am single and 33. "That sounds terrifying," Elena said. "It is," I agreed, "but it is mine. Every problem I have belongs to me. Every dollar I earn belongs to me. I own my mess. And honestly, I have never been happier. Update. 3 months later, the potted plant in the corner of my new apartment was finally sprouting a new leaf. I took it as a personal victory. When I moved into this studio apartment 3 months ago, everything I touched seemed to wither. I had been a woman defined by loss. I had lost my husband, my home, my savings, and my trust in reality. But slowly, painfully, the green was coming back. I sat at my small desk, which doubled as my dining table, and opened my laptop. I logged into my new bank account. The balance wasn't huge. It read $4,000. It was the result of 3 months of aggressive saving, freelance consulting work, and living on rice and beans. But it was a positive number, and it was all mine. No joint access, no hidden withdrawals. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Lucas. Just thought you should know. He tried to appeal, denied. He's not going anywhere. I typed back, "Thanks, Lucas. Coffee is on me next week." I closed the laptop and walked to the window. My apartment was on the 4th floor, overlooking a busy intersection. I could see the city moving below me, chaotic and loud and beautiful. I used to think my life was over when I saw that silver sedan in the driveway. I used to think I was stupid for not seeing the signs, for letting a con artist sleep in my bed for 8 years. Dr. Watts had told me that shame was a useless emotion. She said I was a survivor of a long-term psychological siege. I was starting to believe her. I put on my running shoes. I had a date tonight. Not with a man. I wasn't ready for that yet. Maybe not for a long time. It was a date with myself. I was going to run 5 miles along the river, then I was going to order the most expensive Thai takeout I could afford, and I was going to watch a movie that Damon would have hated. I locked the door behind me. I checked the lock twice, a habit I would probably never break. But as I walked down the hallway, I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't listen for footsteps. I just listened to the sound of my own breathing, steady and strong. I was Nora, just Nora. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from, or what time it is right now. Sometimes one word is enough to say you were here.